It's no secret that cops statistically absolutely suck at shooting. Is this an individual problem of the officers not going out and training on their own? Is this a institutional problem of departments not providing enough training? I think it's a little bit of both. But with that being said, I think the officer's individual responsibility to go out there and train is of the utmost importance when talking about wanting to be prepared to do the job and make it home at the end of the day after every shift. A sort of divisive topic amongst the law enforcement community is what is the best method of training with your firearm? Is it learning from people like Orion Training Group and Centrifuge Training with their classes, or is it learning from the competitive shooting worlds and the practical shooting world? In this video, I brought on a buddy of mine. His name is Matt. I linked up with him on Instagram recently, and we are going to talk about it. So the video does run a little bit long, but really this is a topic that requires a long form video, almost like a podcast, to effectively talk about it and communicate the ideas and the points around it. So with that being said, I jumped on a Google video call with him. So let's jump over to that and talk about it.
I guess we can start off, Matt, if you want to tell people a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. My name is Matt. I'm a former Marine Corps veteran, a former law enforcement veteran, and current mid-grade competition shooter. I'm also a co-founder of a small training company up here in the Midwest. And our goal is to serve as kind of an on-ramp for beginners into more serious competition. We also host outlaw hit factor matches. So we spend a lot of time with a pretty broad swath of different styles of shooter and skills set of shooter. So, that's pretty much my background for the most part.
Okay. How long were you a cop? Do you care to say that, or?
Yeah, I was a cop. I was with the sheriff's department for a couple of years, I think, in different roles.
Okay. Mostly like patrol, or?
Yep. Yeah, patrol. Okay. I was in the jail for a period of time too. That's kind of how that was kind of our track in, if you will.
Okay, cool. So practical shooting for cops. For some reason, it seems to be a debated topic when talking about law enforcement shooting standards and ways to train for shooting and all that sort of stuff. I don't really understand that. I mean, maybe you can provide some more insight into why you think people don't want to do that. I mean, we'll get into it, but
yeah, no, I think, I mean, I'm no expert, and I just want to definitely lay that out, lay the groundwork of that. I didn't spend 30 years doing any gunfighting job. I didn't spend 30 years on the road. I haven't been competitively shooting for, 20 years, anything like that. But I think that does provide me kind of an interesting aspect from the more ground level. Mm-hmm. When I was a cop, and a Marine for that matter, there were voices that would tell us to avoid competition shooting because they looked at it as just golfing with guns, and it was just a fun activity that it's going to build bad habits. And, I do see the paradigm shifting quite a bit. I do see a lot more, not unlike yourself, a lot more cops pushing towards practical shooting as a whole. But if you look at the numbers, it doesn't look good. I mean, there was maybe 40,000 USPSA shooters last year, if I did my math right, and there's 600,000 badged officers in the United States. So even if all of those USPSA shooters were cops, that's still a minuscule percentage of cops practically shooting. So I think where that comes from is I think some of the old heads maybe have a bit of ego attached to it, and they don't want to get outplayed by some civilian possibly. And then they like to be a big fish in a little pond. So when I was in the Corps, or when I was a deputy, I would usually be one of the higher performing on the range and stuff like that. And that would kind of get to your head, and you'd start thinking that you're king shit. You're just death incarnate, basically. And then once I got out of law enforcement, that was the first time I shot a USPSA match, and I just got absolutely steamrolled. And that was so humbling. And I wish I would have had that experience when I was a cop. I felt so confident back then. And then I realized, man, I was rolling around on absolute false premises. I was nowhere near the shooter I thought I was. So I think where it comes from is mostly probably some ego and maybe just lack of information.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think it's also not understanding what the goal of it is. Like a lot of people tend to equate it to like, oh, people are trying to say if you go shoot a competition that you're going to be ready for a gunfight and stuff. It's like that's not what's going on, right? It's trying to make the act of shooting and your skills as a shooter subconscious so that you don't have to think about them when you're in that situation. You can have more time to think about tactics,
Right.
cover, backdrop, all that sort of stuff. So
Absolutely.
we
I think.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, what I was going to say. No, I think you hit a big part of it. There is just a complete misunderstanding. Um, when I was wearing uniforms shooting, the training, as I look back at it, the training was so outcome based. It was all about, hey, check in the box. Look, you did this. You know, here's your cookie for the day. It didn't really teach you anything. I mean, if you could accomplish what they wanted you to accomplish, then you were good to go. Even if you were doing it wrong or had bad fundamentals or something like that, you know, a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and again. So just because you can pass XYZ qual for whatever department does not mean you have this innate ability to shoot. And that's like super evident when I shoot with some of the local officers around here who are, you know, decently high up in rank or tenure at the very least. And, you know, they struggle to roll with a D class or a C class USPSA shooter.
Yeah.
And I think that's really eye opening because C class is the most common classification in USPSA. That's the general population of USPSA. And as I compare them to the law enforcement officers I shot with, they're head and shoulders above. And that's just kind of a stark contrast in my mind of what should look, I mean, what reality should look like. Because, you know, the random accountant down the street has no reason to be that good at shooting other than he wants to be. And that's where I think law enforcement need to wake up a little bit, is they should want to be that good at shooting. So to piggyback off of what you said there, as far as making it subconscious, that is exactly it. It's the shooting is the easiest part of shooting a match. It's the footwork, the position, entry, exit, the stage plan, all the little minutia. That's what screws with people's heads, or that's where you really like kind of shit the bed in a match, is not your shooting. It's, you know, oops, I did the wrong thing. I stutter stepped. I don't know where I am. I'm lost now. And being able to instinctually shoot that well and then carry through that is good. That translates into, like you said, it allows you to think about your tactical positioning, your cover, your backdrop, maybe where adjacent units are. Cause I don't know, maybe you're responding to a call from different directions so yeah, I think that's where the huge misconception is that competition shooting isn't a scenario. It's not some, hey, you're getting attacked by 15 ninjas from all these different angles, go shoot them all. No, it's simply a divided attention exercise while maintaining your shooting proficiency is kind of how I would say it, you know, in my limited experience anyway.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's perfect. And I mean, you kind of touched on it, but like baseline, if you're a cop and you don't think this, you need to rethink your life. But like, cops suck at shooting. Like the vast majority absolutely suck. And if you aren't actively shooting, or rather training practical shooting concepts, you probably suck at shooting and you need to. So we both went out there and had filmed some videos of us doing the gateway defense standard drills. So we'll kind of go through those and we'll talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, and then, you know, how does it apply to cops, and like why does doing these drills help you as a cop in terms of your shooting ability? So the first drill was the sits reload sits. I don't know if they really called it anything, but
stage 1, I think, is what they named it. So
I mean, it doesn't have a cool name like a Bill drill or El Presidente, but
yeah, it's effectively a double bill.
Yeah, double bill with the reload. So, what's the point of this drill?
So I think, and that's another misconception. Let me get on my soapbox real quick. One of the guys I founded my training company with, he's a great shooter, really good dude. But admittedly, he's obsessed with the bill drill, and I've had to talk to him about it. Like, hey, homie, like, let's calm down on the bill drills. We're missing the point. Mm-hmm. The point of a bill drill isn't to go shoot 100 bill drills a day and be like, hey, that's my best one, I'm going to throw it on Instagram. You're kind of defeating the purpose. I think A couple, especially when you're cold, are super important because it's testing your index, it's testing your grip, your eyes, your recoil management, everything. Pretty much your everything. It's from your draw to your eyes and your recoil management. That's what the bill drill tests. And then that goes just as far when you add a reload and a second bill drill in there, because you have to, one, have a quick manipulation with your magazine, get your gun back up, and then present it back with your index, and then deliver another 6. I think that's where a lot of people probably mess up on that one, is rebuilding their grip and index and shooting. Because they're so hyped up from the reload. Maybe they did a really good reload and their heart rate gets up and they're super excited, and also they throw that gun out and their grip's jacked up and they start throwing rounds. That's probably where I think a lot of the mistakes happen. But all that is can you perform all of the fundamentals effectively under time? That's what that first drill is.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, the reason that's so important for a law enforcement officer is generally when a law enforcement officer gets in a violent encounter, it's going to be closer, more violent, and over quicker than they anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have time to have a 3-second draw. You don't have time to have 0.35 splits. You don't have time to have a 4-second reload. So that's why that one is good. It drills in all of your fundamentals that you need to operate quickly while being very punishing on time. Stage 1, as I'm sure you found out just like I did, stage 1 is the single most punishing stage out of all 3 for time. That's the one that if you screw your time up, it's over. So that one just is very punishing on time. And that's how that applies to cops in my mind. It makes you perform all of the fundamentals quickly, and it will punish you if you don't. So I mean, that's essentially that's the both of it.
Yeah, I mean, when I was doing it, I definitely noticed that my reloads were completely fucked up. Like, I was, and I should have footage playing over at some points, but like my mag wouldn't drop out properly because I was doing this weird flicking with my hand.
Glock problems, man.
Yeah, I don't know where I got that from, like to flick the mag out. It's just, I kind of have done that forever. And I found it so much easier to just like maybe rotate the gun just a little bit and hit the button and it would just fall out. Almost every time, even on an empty mag. No base plate, all that sort of stuff. So that was an issue that I had. And I mean, it's very situational when you're gonna have to reload in like a cop encounter, like shooting encounter. Like, can it happen? Absolutely. Is it likely to happen? I mean, who knows, right?
Yeah, I don't think the reload in there, I don't think like a cop shouldn't get wrapped around the axle too hard on the reload section of it, because you're right, statistically speaking. Like when the law enforcement officer gets in a shooting and they have to reload, it's going to be an administrative reload after they run it to empty and the fight's over. But the fact of the matter is something can happen. Your base plate could take a round and all your bullets fall out, or you picked a bad mag that day. So I don't think it's a bad thing to be very fast on reloads. I never think it'll be a bad thing, because you have everything to gain and nothing to lose. But ultimately, I don't think the reload manipulation, and again, the gateway guys could come in and completely dumbfucker me on this, and they're better than me, so by all means, I invite them to. But I think in my eyes, importantly, it's not so much the reload, I think it's kind of a speed bump for the second 6, is are you going to rebuild your grip? Are you going to re-get your index? Or are you just index hosing, not even aiming, not getting, some sight, some, target focus with the dot,
Yeah.
So at least anyway, that's how I see it. I've kind of trained reloads to be really pretty smooth, so I don't think about them much. So in that case, I'm not thinking about my reload. I'm thinking about my index when I come back on targets. So
yeah, I mean, if you want to like kind of morph this drill to be sort of more applicable to cops, and I think the third drill probably sort of does this, but you could. I think it was at 10 yards, right? Or 7 yards?
Yeah, yep.
It was one of the two. So have the first target at 7 or 10, and then throw the second target at 20, 25. So instead of having one target, you'd have 2. And so it would be sits on the close target, reload sits on the far target. You know what I mean?
Because, and that would essentially be testing the same things.
Yeah.
You're just bringing in throttle control at that point, which I think is great. So I think that's more of an expansion. But now, honestly, I wouldn't even think that's a tactical thing. That leans back into hell. A USPSA shooter would do very well with that.
Yeah.
I've been to a lot of outdoor matches where, you start off with like a 3-yard target, and all of a sudden there's one at 40. So I mean that can happen. So
because I'm just thinking,
and I think that's another thing too that I don't know if I missed this earlier in the introduction or not, but I don't believe that there's a difference between practical shooting and tactical shooting. It's just context. It's the context of what you're doing it. If I'm at a match or you're in a gunfight, we're both going to want to get our gun out quickly, on target quickly, hit accurately, avoid the things we don't want to hit. No shoots for me, civilians for you. Yours are a little bit higher liability, but all in the same. I don't believe there's a difference, and that's the other one I want to drive. Another point I want to drive home, that practical shooting is tactical shooting, and if you can't discern the two, or if you think there's a difference, you probably don't belong doing either, due to some sort of IQ issue.
Yeah.
But so you bringing up the 6, with the distance 6 in the back, that's kind of like Matt Pranka's what is it? Was it the MXAD drill or something of the sort, where it's I think it's 2 or 6 on the front target and then like 2 headshots on a slightly farther target or something like that. It just builds in a harder transition with a lower percentage target, throttling that trigger. So that's just kind of like playing on legendary mode for that stage 1. I agree with you.
Yeah, and the reason I bring that up is because I'm already just thinking of what people are going to say who are against the idea of practical shooting. Like, oh, well, if you're reloading, you're not going to be standing still, yada, blah, blah. Like, that doesn't matter. That's not what you're doing this for.
Exactly. That comes right back to outcome-based versus method-based.
Yeah.
So outcome-based training is going to be all that scenario BS where they're like, I'm never going to shoot a guy 6 times, reload, shoot him 6 times, standing still. I would hope not. Yeah, I would agree with you, man. I really hope not. But that's not what we're testing. I'm testing, can you do these things and maintain your fundamentals? Because that means you have these fundamentals that you can do under time or duress in some sense and tie it together. There's a lot of dudes that I was in law enforcement. I won't say a lot of dudes, so I don't want to air anybody out, but some dudes that were in law enforcement that I was with, or maybe other departments that were just the super average shooters, but they would go to advanced CQB tactical vehicle course. And it's like, homie, you can't double tap at 10 yards. Why do you need to know how to get out of a car shooting? Like, let's, walk before we run. And I think that's where a lot of cops get lost too. They get wrapped around the axle of doing all the tactics. Problem is, and once again, I'm not an expert on this. I've just been taught by people maybe who have a lot of experience. So I stand to be corrected and I accept that. But you can generally, or at least some of the times, you can outshoot shitty tactics, but you're never going to out-tactic shitty shooting.
Yeah.
And I think that's the number one thing. Like, I think people need to maybe come to terms with.
Put that on a t-shirt, bro. Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's the quote of the year.
It's not my quote. Maybe I'm the first to deliver it like that. I doubt it, but hey.
No, yeah, I mean, I think those tactical classes have a place in the training space, but if you're a new cop, or let's say you're an older cop, like 10 years on, 15 years on, and maybe you're kind of just entering this world of even exploring going to outside training and spending your money and your time to do that, I think the better approach, because I did this backwards. I went tactical training first, and then now I'm going into shooting training. I think a better approach would be to go into like a practical shooting class with any of the competition shooters, any of the big guys in the competition world. Go take their classes, learn how to shoot a pistol really well, learn how to shoot a rifle really well, and then go into the vehicle stuff, the CQB stuff, get into that.
And even if you do them in tandem, I think it's just having the processing power in your brain to understand your differences. I think that's kind of where your key to success is you can do them in tandem. When I was in what's that, cop school, the academy, you would talk about how many different that was real smart sounding, how many different topics a day. And it's not like I would let DUI training bleed into my hand-to-hand combat course that day. If you can put a line in those and put a fork in those classes and call them done for the day, you can do the same thing with your shooting. You just need to be able to open your eyes and say, just because I'm touching a gun doesn't mean I'm doing this or I'm doing that. It's, hey, I'm working on my sight return today. I'm working on my index today. I'm working on my doubles today. And then maybe tomorrow I'm with my team and we're going to work on, fatal funnel stuff, just making sure we don't like look like a dickhead in front of a door and get shot, sort of a thing. I think it's just being able to demystify that a little bit. I think is kind of important.
Yeah, I mean, I would bet money that if you take a Grandmaster USPSA shooter, like not a cop, just a Grandmaster USPSA shooter, and then put him through like a tactics class, and like let's say it was a week long vehicle close quarters battle, right? I think they would be a freaking monster if they ever had to actually do that in real life. Like they would just destroy it. They'd crush
Well,
it, you know?
and I think the proof is in the pudding on that. I mean, look at I've trained with Hunter Constantine. He trained our local cops around here. Right now, one of my other founders of the company, he's pretty high up in the training, the actual state training world for law enforcement here, and he's spent his own time and money to go meet Ben Stagger. He's training with him today as we speak. So, he does all his tactics stuff too, but he's going to go to the grandmaster of grandmasters and
Yeah.
and get trained. So I think the paradigm is shifting, but I just don't think it's shifting hard enough. And another reason there maybe is because the grandmasters and the really good shooters out there, they want to transfer this knowledge. They're very giving with that in the shooting community, and I think that's amazing. But I think a lot of the newer cops to shooting don't want to listen to them because they seem so ethereal. They're so up there. They're so good. So they're like, these guys are just blah, blah, blah. They're too good. So maybe I think this conversation we're having might be more digestible to the average beat cop, maybe who's like fresh out of the academy. He doesn't want to go get his pecker slapped by Stagger at a range somewhere. So maybe let some like long-haired fruitcake from the Midwest tell you how to shoot. I don't know.
Yeah.
But maybe that's more digestible to them. I don't know. But
Yeah.
something to think about.
Yeah. So the second drill, I'm just gonna call it the crisscross drill because again,
Sure.
they call it stage 2. It was 2 targets. I believe it was two to the body on the left target, 2 to the right head, 2 to the right body, 2 to the left head, and then 2 body, 2 body. So I should have footage going over this that demonstrates that. But I really liked this one because it's kind of like what I was saying to morph the first drill into. It's a lot of throttle control and accurate shots into speedy shots and accurate shots into speedy shots. So it actually adds that transition in there. And you have to actually, instead of just focusing your vision on one point, you have to transition to another point, which is, in my opinion, that is a little bit more applicable to like shooting at a moving target, maybe. So somebody running away from you, you're constantly transitioning your vision, right?
Yeah, I would say that it applies to that, or it applies to like a disappearing target is like maybe like what they would call it in competition, or let's say you got a very tight time window shot. I don't know, think homeboy hanging out the door, shooting at you, pulling back in, so it's how to transition quick, how to let your eyes run the show. And that's what this one was all about. Obviously, all these drills, your draw comes into play, your recoil management comes into play. Obviously, that's just called shooting. That's always going to come into play. But I think this one really was an eye workout. And your eyes have to lead the way with shooting. Eyes control everything. Target focus on everything. That's how you're going to win the day. And going from being able to have that mental clarity to push the speed and get your 2 first off, and then transition up to that low percentage target, the head, and then slow down, get 2 in that box, drop, and then carry back up, and then do that is, man, it ate my lunch the first time I ran it. I got to admit, like I was just struggle busting so hard. I had these weird like trigger freezes where I just wasn't it just wasn't smooth. And I was getting in my head on those head box transitions. So that one is a fantastic one. I think that one I'm going to work on that like mad because I got so pissed off at it to the range that I need to do better at it so I can like sleep at night. But that one is just all about those hard transitions into low percentage shots, and I think that is a super good skill. The drill reminds me of, it's called Bunny Stacks, and I think it's by Joel Park or Hwansek Kim. It's one of the practical training shooter group guys, and so I've done the Bunny Stacks before, which is just body, head, sort of as like an X, but coming down to that pattern, the 2 extra and the 2 bodies was this extra little step, the icing on the cake, just to make sure you had to throttle back up, and that's tricky.
Yeah. Well, and also like if you know, if you're one of the cops out there watching this and you're just like, I don't see how this applies to my job still, blah, blah, blah. Like, think maybe moving target into hostage shot. So, like, maybe you're like, there's been a bunch of videos out there of guys that are running away from officers, pointing a gun back at them. The officers are engaging, and all of a sudden they're taking a guy hostage. Like, that's not.
There was a recent one. I forgot where it's from, but they charged inside the home, and the guy and the officer stopped him with a headshot. Prime example. Like, he had to come up the stairs, transition, track, you know, his hostage and his hostage taker, and then made a pretty well executed shot. There you go. I mean, that's a pretty clear cut answer on that one. Or, you know, I don't think. I think people once again get wrapped around the axle of a scenario. Like, when am I going to shoot bad guy A in the chest and then double tap the second guy in the face? I'm like, well, if you do, that would be kind of effective. But don't think of it like that. I'd say think of it more as your gun's already out, like you would be on target A, and then something pops out at you up here. Maybe I'm not a scenario guy, but if I had to contextualize it, that's what it would be. It would be I'm up and I have to transition quickly and make a shot.
Like CQB, maybe.
Yeah. So name it, whatever it is, you know?
Yeah.
Dude pops out of a car in the back seat. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, like, I mean, that could happen at any point in a felony stop. You're holding on the car, you know somebody's in there, and all of a sudden the guy pops out of, you know, maybe the opposite side of the car. And you're pointing at the driver's side, he's on the passenger side, and he pops out, and all you see is his head and his arm with the gun, and he starts shooting at you.
Yeah. And there's so many scenarios, like you said, that it could be, but that's why I also would want to circle back and tell any new officer that wants to get after it, don't make a scenario for yourself. Just understand that it applies and then go get good at it and don't worry about it.
Yeah.
That's what I'd say. Don't build a story, just be good.
Yeah, and that's hopefully the overarching goal of this video, is to just be like, hey, just go shoot practical shooting stuff. Go to competitions to test yourself, but then use practical shooting on the range to train and get better for competitions, which will make you better for work.
Absolutely.
And I mean, the last thing I'll say on that specific drill is, like, again, think hostage situation, not necessarily like the first scenario I had brought up, but like working your height over bore on your pistol. Like, it's not something that a lot of people talk about, but there is a little bit of height over bore on the pistol. And so not only are you shooting for just that head bots, but you're shooting for the A square in that bots. And so to go from shooting the low left target to transitioning up to high right and having to get it into that little bots, you have to think about height over bore just a little bit.
Yeah, and I think mechanically you're probably correct. And this is probably like personal to each person, so like obviously I won't speak to that. I would say one way to maybe solve that problem and not think about height over bore is just to make sure that you are absolutely hard target focused.
Yeah.
When I was making my good clean headshots, I wasn't really thinking height over. Let me 1 second here. Let's clear. So like the optic on my gun is not low. Like the Masterpiece arms plates are plenty high, and like Holosun's got a pretty decently high deck. So height over bore would be a thing. But if you're hard target focused, I don't know. I never had a problem with it. So it's picking that small part out on the target and making sure you're focusing on that, and then your dot just goes there.
Right.
So I couldn't see the A in the A box, but I knew where it is. So when I'm coming up from A chest, I just knew how to transition my eyes up there, and it's actually hard with the really tight transitions because those targets where they were supposed to be like 12 inches from each other at 10 yards, that's a pretty tight transition. So it's actually hard to get your eyes to move first and get the gun over without getting sucked through the tube. And that's also kind of what made it tricky. It's really teaching your eyes to be just snap. So that way you can really get a good clean transition. But I think to maybe solve your height over bore issue, it would be to really, really, really focus on target focus. That was not very clear. I didn't like how I said that.
Yeah. No, you're good.
To make sure you are paying attention to target focus.
Yeah. So we'll go into the third drill, I guess, now. Drill 3 was, I believe we started at 25, and then we shot, it's just one target, and it was 2 in the body at 25, run up to 10, I believe it was. shoot 2 to the head, and then immediately transition back down to the body while moving forward and shooting 2 more to the body. So
Yeah, it was exactly what you just said there with 2 targets.
it was 2 targets?
I believe so, yeah. Unless I misread.
The footage will be on screen. It'll
Sure.
it'll tell itself, but I really liked this one. This was probably like for those guys who are inevitably going to watch this and try to equate it to a scenario, this is probably the most like relevant.
It's the easiest sell.
Yeah, like it could be any number of things, but really think foot pursuit. If you saw my foot pursuit drill video, like you've got the running into an entry position to bringing the gun up, getting shots on target. You've got the low percentage shots. You've got the distance shots. You've just got everything. So I really liked this one. I noticed for me when I would come into position and shoot the 2 headshots and then go to start moving again, I would do this like I would kind of break my gun down and then re-punch it out for like no reason.
Yep. That is super duper common when I shoot with either current LE or like LE veterans or military veterans. They break the gun down way too much. And I can understand what they're doing. They're constant, and that's usually because they're just trained to do it. Like when I shoot with Marines, and I was a Marine, so I feel comfortable talking some shit here. It's they come out bang bang and they snap back, and it's like, what if your first 2 shots missed because they probably did because you don't do practical shooting? So now you're back here. You have to come back out and re-engage. Stay up. There's no reason. There's very few reasons in any circumstance, in my opinion, whether it's practical shooting at a match or law enforcement. If your gun's out, it has to be out for whatever reason. It should at least be somewhat up. So people are way too habitual at breaking the gun down, especially if you don't know if it's done. If the gunfight isn't done, keep it up. And here's the thing: I'm not trying to like beat you over the head for it. It's super common. It's just something that's institutionally been trained through. And honestly, a lot of practical shooters do it too. They wait way too late to get their gun up. They'll get into a position, see their targets, and all of a sudden like, oh, hey, wait, I got a fancy race gun here. I should be slinging some lead. So I think this one's absolutely great on how to start applying the brakes while you're getting a sight picture and learn how to separate your legs from your body and your sight, basically. Removing your legs from your gun. That's kind of how it was taught to me. So that way you can be hauling ass, decelerating, chopping your steps, coming up, and that way by the time you hit that 10-yard block or wherever it would be, you can engage accurately. I think that's the biggest takeaway, at least for me on that one, is the position entry and then exit when you have to walk past and do the 2 walking. That's another one that people they get way too aggressive on the steps, like they forgot how to walk all of a sudden. So you can even see it in my video. I throw a shot hard. I did it. I'm guilty of it. I take a step way too hard. I didn't isolate everything. I threw it hard. I went I think it was like high delta even, which at 10 yards I'm not happy with. So I think it's a phenomenal drill. I couldn't agree with you more.
So some common misconceptions. We've already kind of touched on some of them. Not realistic. Practical shooting isn't realistic. It doesn't apply to my job and what I'm going to have to do out there on the street if I were to get into a shooting. Again, we kind of touched on this already. It's not about making it realistic to your job. It's about making the shooting subconscious. It's making you shoot at a high level. Your grip is already locked in. Your vision's locked in. All your fundamentals are locked in. Your reloads, your movement, all that stuff is good. That way, if you're in a shooting, regardless of the circumstances around the shooting, you can just perform on the shooting part of it by default subconsciously, and then worry about the backdrop, the cover, concealment, where your partners are, all of that sort of stuff. You can think more about that. You have more brain power to process that stuff as opposed to your shooting.
Yep. And, I think you just articulated that really well. I think the number one thing I want to drive home to anybody, whether it's self-defender, a security guard, a military, veteran or something of the sort, law enforcement, it's you don't have anything to lose, but you have everything to gain. Like being a better shot is never once going to harm you. I can't think of a situation where being a high level competitive shooter is going to actually cause you problems in a law enforcement scenario. I cannot think of one.
No.
Because if you're worth your salt, that means you are going to keep that high level skill, and then you're going to remember your tactics. Because the classic, hey, you're going to get killed in the streets is, oh, you're gonna run past cover, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do that. I mean, is it impossible? I guess not. But here's the thing: there's lots of, body worn cameras where cops who definitely don't do practical shooting, because you can tell by their shooting, are running past cover, are disregarding cover. So you can just tell that they don't take their training serious from any way, any flavor, whether it's tactical or competition. They're not taking it seriously. So I think the argument that it's going to get you killed in the streets is just so weak, because it doesn't actually discuss the root of the problem, and that's that the cops aren't training. So that's what I want to drive home, is that you have everything to gain from being better and nothing to lose.
Yeah, and to like kind of further add on to my points, it's like I kind of mentioned, it's allowing you to have more brain power to think, and that's the biggest asset you're gonna have in that kind of a situation, is being able to think. Because again, you're not shooting bill drills to expect to be shooting a bill drill out there on the street. You're doing that to make sure your grip, your vision, all that stuff is good. But realistically, like what a perfect scenario looks like is you see a threat present itself, you have a fast enough draw to be able to engage that threat either before he can engage you or just after he can engage you, hoping that he doesn't hit you, and then being able to guide your dot through your vision to that target and make effective, accurate hits as fast as possible. Now, you can't put a hard number on that saying, oh, with 0.13 splits or 0.15 splits or whatever it is, because that's all going to be dependent on the distance and if they're moving and all that sort of stuff. But it's being like mindfully present and able to take those accurate shots as fast as possible, and not just slam the trigger as fast as you can, regardless of the distance and moving and all that sort of stuff,
Yep. And, I think that brings in a good point to talk about too, is maybe where some people start getting into practical shooting to become better at whatever, for any reason. And they start thinking about that, and they have their timer and they're chasing split times. And, I'm not going to say this for sure, but I've had some really high level shooters tell me that, anything past 0.20 splits is kind of a party trick. Like, it's awesome if you can do it. It's not going to harm you, but your money is made in transitions. And, I think that's a really good point, is if a law enforcement officer can draw their weapon and fire, let's say, I don't know, 4 times in 0.2 splits, and they get 4 clean hits and they stop the threat, that's a win. Now, let me tell you, is that assailant who's attacking them going to feel the difference between 0.20 and 0.16?
No.
Probably not. I'm guessing no. And if there is some difference, it's going to be relatively minute. So I think it's law enforcement officers need to use practical shooting for what it's for, but don't get wrapped up in the Instagram cool guy stuff either, of saying like, look just how fast I can pull the trigger. Don't get me wrong. That's a good skill to have. And if you can do it quickly, then by all means, I know guys who can do, like 0.13 splits at 15 yards and just stack rounds. That's amazing. Do that. But don't get so wrapped up in these tiny little minutiae where you're trying to become better and you're maybe handicapping yourself because you're thinking about all the wrong things. So it's not overly focusing, I think, is another thing to think about there.
Yeah, speaking of thinking about the wrong things, I think, and I fell victim to this myself at first, is this idea of like, well, it's sort of a 2-part thing. If I use competition gear, it's going to throw me off when I am using my duty gear. And then the second thing would be, I can't use my duty gear to shoot competition because I'm going to be at so much of a disadvantage because I don't have a compensator and a gas pedal and a flared Madwell and all the Gucci stuff that, open division guns have. And so they just kind of get discouraged from even trying, because it's like they're competitive in nature and they just know that they're going to get steamrolled. Which is funny, because I'd imagine if a top hasn't shot competitions before, it's not going to matter if they have a Gucci gun; they're going to get steamrolled anyway. Like,
Yeah. So no, that's a really good point. And I don't think there's a wrong answer in this one. I think some people maybe have an ability to maybe shoot more different platforms and not have it harm them. I don't switch platforms a lot. I shoot the 2011 platform, but I can bounce between different flavors of 2011, and it doesn't seem to slow me down. I mean, maybe very minutely, but not in a way that it's like so detrimental to the point where it's just I can't do it. But I've shot raced out guns, more open style guns, shot them hard, and then I would still be able to come back to a duty style. I've got a Canic sitting over here that I've gotten. I'm very happy with my performance with the Canic, and I never shoot it. It's just that thankfully I might have developed past where the gear matters as much, where I can just use my fundamentals. I just have to kind of fit the gun in my hands quick before I start shooting, and I can okay, I can draw that, I can index that,
yeah,
and then it starts working. Some people maybe can't do that, and then if that's the case, just shoot your duty gun. Like that's I don't want to call it a weak excuse, but if you're that competitive that you'll just not try because, well, I don't have a $10,000 Infinity, I just have a Glock. And it's like, I don't know, man, that's just kind of pussy. So
yeah,
you're going to be at a disadvantage in a gunfight because you don't want some rich dude with an open gun to beat you on Sunday. Like, that doesn't check out to me. Also, I just don't think the whole, race equipment versus your duty equipment is a good handicap. I don't think that's a good argument. I remember talking to you on the phone about this. I said, do you concealed carry? And you told me yes. And I said, do you take your level 3 Safariland holster and shove it in the front of your pants?
Yep.
And you said, no.
Hell no.
And I'm like, so you proved to me right there that a law enforcement officer has the mental capacity to switch between different draws and holsters and not be harmed.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've had a lot of cops tell me like, no, I just can't use a race holster, man. It's gonna give me training scars. And I was like, oh my God. If you can't change holsters without having training scars, I'm worried about you swallowing your own tongue. Like, Come on, dude. Like, give yourself some more credit. You're a cop. You passed a lot of hard things to pass to get here. Give yourself some credit.
Yeah, and I mean that even goes further for the like jump out boys out there who work plainclothes and marks, uniform presence at the same time. It's like everybody runs it different, but myself, when I'm working plainclothes, I like to run it's an outside the waistband holster, but it's still a concealable outside the waistband, and I'll just throw a shirt over it, and it's essentially a race holster. There's no level 2, level 3. It's just friction holding the gun in there, and you pull it out. And so I mean, for me, the only thing you kind of compete with when you change platforms is potentially like grip angles, which if you're really locked into like a Glock grip angle, switching to something with a more 2011 grip angle might be a little bit of a switch for you. But for myself, I find just a couple reps in dry fire, like pre-shift or something, is sufficient for me to just rep it out 3, 4, 5 times, and it's like, okay, yep, just don't torque my wrist down that far, and it's fine.
I think it's deeply overplayed. And I think the reason people think it's such a big difference is probably because like everybody knows somebody who's got like a Staccato XC. It's like it's the everyman racy 2011, and they shoot it a handful of times. They're like, oh my gosh, that is such an unfair advantage. And don't get me wrong, it shoots super great and all that kind of stuff. But like, if you suck, you suck. You're not going to just all of a sudden become good. And the thing that kind of gets me is the only time where like the racy features on like, let's say a CZ or a 2011 are going to benefit you is when you're chasing tenths of seconds in a match. That's where it's gamer. It's a gamer gun because you're playing the gamer side of it. I don't inherently believe that you are somehow at a disadvantage in a gunfight because you have a stock Glock 17 versus an XC. For what you need to do in that moment, it's going to put holes where holes aren't supposed to be, right? Mm-hmm. The only time that those mechanical advantages on guns really come down to play is, like I said, is when you're chasing very specific metrics. That's when you're playing the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like an open gun, they are super fun to shoot. They're super fast. I mean, they can be almost like telepathic how flat they are and just, how much gas is being used to manage that. I'm not going to stick one in my pants to go like run high risk warrants. Do you know what I mean? I'm not like, I don't feel undergunned if I don't have an open gun. So it's, I don't know. I think people play into it way too much. But at the flip side, practical shooters or like your competition style shooters overplay guns way too much. They're like, if I don't get an Atlas versus a Staccato, I'm just never going to make master. And it's like, okay, buddy.
Yeah, I don't know the guy's
Sure.
name, but there's that guy that won a championship with basically stock 34 Glock. Like
Robert Vogel back in the day, I think.
I
Bob
don't.
Vogel, something like that.
Rings
Or
a
just
bell, but
2 years ago, Nils Jonasson took limited division nationals shooting a minor power factor gun, and it was a plastic canic. So he went out there and he beat the steel frame 40 cal 2011s with a plastic canic in 9mm. So
yeah,
it can be done.
Well, and I'm not a great shooter, obviously, when it comes to competitions. Like I'm kind of mid-pack, usually on the scoreboards, but when I went and shot Vortex Shootout 2023, there was guys that had the 2011s, the Etsy's, the CZ Shadows, the quote-unquote competition guns, and I'm out there running my stock duty Glock 17 with a red dot on it and a pretty cheap AR with a cheap scope, and I'm shooting better than they are. Like,
no, and that's right there. It's proof in the pudding right there. Like once again, I like nicer guns, and that's just because I like nicer guns.
Yeah.
In the words of Ben Stagger, nice guns shoot nice.
Yeah.
That's as far as I think about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like I like them because I'm a mechanic nerd. I'm a mechanics nerd. I love how the guns are built and put together. It's kind of like how some watch nerds just love how the fitment and the mechanics. It doesn't tell time any different. So I admit I like it because I'm kind of a nerd. And do they shoot nice? Hell yeah. But like if someone came down and waved their wand and said, Matt, you shoot canics for the rest of your life, I'm like, okay.
Yep, still gonna perform.
Time to shoot, like whatever.
Question.
Just is what it is,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the last thing I guess we can touch on really quick, and then we'll close it out, is like we kind of already talked about it really early on in this video, but like we're not trying to say don't train tactically when it comes to shooting. Like don't we're not trying to say don't go take the CTB courses and the vehicle courses and all that stuff. Like those have their place. You just have to have the right mindset going into them, that they're not a shooting class. They're not going to make you a better shooter. They are strictly tactics. And so if you're not a good shooter already, those aren't going to help you become a good shooter. They're not going to adequately prepare you for the shooting portion of it. They're going to potentially prepare you for the tactical portion of it, but not the shooting portion.
Mm-hmm. I think Franka, the gentleman you spoke with before, he had a really good line on it, and I think I kind of loosely quoted him earlier, is, if you can't even hit targets at 10 yards, why are you doing this advanced XYZ course?
Yeah.
Like we said earlier, it's a walk before you run. But I'm not sitting there saying like, hey, you become a Grandmaster at USPSA, you are now, tier 1 Delta SEAL Team 6, Ranger. No, I didn't say that. I just said you're a good shooter now. Now you can go learn how to do all the cool guy shit or learn it in tandem. They're all skills. I didn't go to, when I was a cop, I didn't go to the shooting range with my SIG to become a better driver. I separated my stuff out. And that's kind of nuts and bolts of it. I think, thankfully, fitness is another thing that's growing in the law enforcement community. And I would love to ask the cops that are arguing with me about practical shooting is, well, do you go to the gym and imagine that you're bench pressing bad guys off your chest, or are you just trying to get big? And they're like, just trying to get big.
Yeah.
Okay. So you prove to me there that you can separate context from skill. So I don't know.
Well, even context within the skill, like, you always hear people talking about fitness for cops, and everyone's just like, go to the gym, like get fit. Nobody questions what methods you use to get fit, whether it's CrossFit, powerlifting, whatever. Like that doesn't matter. Just go get fit. It's like, yes, go be a better shooter. Go be better at tactics. They're all separate, and you do separate things to get better at them.
Yeah, I think like the core competencies are be athletic and don't suck. I think that's kind of like the secret how to come home alive as a cop is be mildly athletic. I got a dad bod. I did when I was a cop, but I was at least mildly athletic. You know what I mean? Yeah, so I
Yeah.
think that's the key is be athletic and then don't suck at shooting, and you are already leaps and bounds ahead of your peers. And then, but I don't know. I just think it just needs to be about that strive for perfection. You'll never get perfect. You'll never be perfect at anything, never. But I think you should strive for it at the very least, because then at least you're always fighting for something. You have something to chase. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's, I think, the greatest thing why I love competition shooting and why I would have loved it back then is that it gives me something to chase. Even if which I'm not a master yet, but if I hit master, well, cool. I get to chase GM. And then if I hit GM, well, then I get to chase the super squad for nationals. And then I get to chase, first place. So there's always something to get better at. And I just wish, and I'm not saying cops as a whole are like this. I'm not ACAB, some crazy guy like that. I'm just trying to say, like, I just wish as a whole we could see more of that strive to really become better.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what the answer is to fix that, because that's just a personal responsibility thing. Like, it's kind of like just telling people like go get fit. It's like, yeah, majority of cops probably still aren't going to go get fit. So how do we incentivize them to go get fit? I don't know the answer to that. That's a whole
Yeah,
different
I mean,
video. That's a whole different video.
yep, yeah. That's
Um,
how many licks does it take to get the center of a Tootsie Pop? The world may never know.
yeah, yeah. So I guess to close it out, I want to present a question. I'll answer it first, and then I'll let you answer. But for the cops that are watching this, and they might be like, okay, like I get it now. I want to go start working on this, but like, what should I do first? What is kind of the path of progression on what I should be focusing on to get better, not only as a shooter, but like in the context of how it applies to my job? I would personally say get really good at draws, and like the draw to first shot, first couple shots, like get really fucking fast at that, like as fast as possible. And then you can start working on the transition stuff to work vision. That would be kind of
Mhm.
my pipeline, would be just get absolutely ridiculously blazing fast with draws, with everything from like standing still on your draws to doing them while you're moving, from seated positions, like from all the positions you could find yourself in on the streets, like get really fast with your draws to getting rounds on target as fast as possible. Like that's the first thing I would care about personally.
No, and I don't think if that's someone this new officer starting from like absolutely like ground zero base level, I think that's decent advice for sure. Um, Mine, I guess my answer to that would be maybe a little more jump in with both feet. I'm not saying you're wrong. I think those are absolutely
Hmm.
phenomenal skills to perfect.
Hmm.
Mine's maybe just a little more aggressive. I'd say find a match. I don't care if it's PCSL, USPSA, Outlaw,
Yeah.
IDPA. I don't care. Don't care. Research the rules for like 15 fucking minutes, figure it out a little bit, and then go shoot it. And then look at where you got your ass kicked. And then that'll tell you exactly where you need to work. If your draw to first shot was so much slower than everybody else, then just like you said, now you work on draws.
Yeah.
If your split times and transition times are slow, okay. Well, then if your split times and transition times are slow and then your shots are bad, well, then we really know what we need to work on. It's everything.
Yeah.
And then what I would do is I'd find, you know, if you live somewhere, like I know where I live, not a lot of training gets to happen up in the Midwest, but you can maybe travel. If you live in a bigger city, there's always going to be a class somewhere. Take a class. Get out,
Yes.
as Grantham says, get out and train.
Yep.
Have someone who's better than you teach you. Even if you go to a grandmaster that beats your ass at that match and you say, "Hey, dude, could you help me?" They'll probably say yes. Those guys are usually really nice. And even if that just shapes you up a little bit, it'll build you a path. It'll kind of put like a training plan in your head together of saying like, this is what I need to work on. I've had newer cops who are just super athletic, like just burn my ass down on a run, who could just blaze the field. And then they're like, Delta Mike, 2 Mike. And it's like, okay, well, you are super athletic, but you can't shoot. So let's not worry so much about the athleticism. Let's worry about hey, you know. So that would be my answer. It's a little long-winded, but I'd say find a match, find out where your weaknesses really are under time, and then work on it from there. So, go
Yeah.
watch Stagger, watch Joel Park, watch Rob Epifania, Tom Castro, all of those dudes. They all have a little bit different way of teaching you, and something's going to click with you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely like go shoot a match. That's going to be the best gauge of where you're at. Um,
Mhm.
And I think the most important part about that, you want to self-reflect a lot on it, but it's hard to do that sometimes if it's your first match because you're just so caught up in,
Yeah.
you know, shooting and moving, and it's just all kind of a blur. Like I know my first match was. So have somebody video you. If you don't have a buddy there, like I haven't been to a ton of matches, but every match I've ever been to, everybody's always super cool. If you want to have somebody take a video, they'll always take a video of you. And if you're just really like, you don't want to worry about that, or maybe, you know, oh, well, they take terrible videos. Okay, cool. Like get like an Insta360 Go 3, get a camera that you can strap on your head and video you that way. You aren't going to be able to see your movement necessarily, of like where you're putting your feet and stuff, but you can at least get a gauge and see what you were doing.
Absolutely. It's a very welcoming community. I think that's a great part, is it's a very welcoming community. Even though the sport isn't that welcoming, that's kind of like the role my company fills. It's an on-ramp to more serious shooting. But I will admit the community is very welcoming. So if you can get schooled, no one's going to tell you no if you help. Hell, you could probably show up to a match as long as you got ammo. Someone would say, shoot my gun. You know what I mean? Yeah. They're so nice. And that's the one thing to remember, is that everyone there wants to see you do good. Even the competitive guys, they want heat. They want someone to chase them. So just don't be afraid. And hell, half the dudes that see a cop show up and do it, they usually, it's kind of like a tip of the hat. Like, oh, that's awesome. That dude's actually trying. You know, I'm tired of shooting against dentists and accountants. I want a cop out here to be, you know, doing the job. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's been a good talk, man. Is there anything you want to say before we close this thing out? No, I thought it was really good. Just, you know, thanks. It was an interesting reason why this happened. I was talking mad shit in the comments, and then here we are. So I'm glad to be able to, you know, do this. I think this is something that maybe the shooting community could do better at, is like we get kind of toxic sometimes. Oh yeah. But you know, here we are. So I'm glad we had the conversation, and I really hope, even if it helps one dude, if there's one view and he becomes the best cop shooter ever, then I'm just ecstatic. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the goal. The whole reason I'm doing this whole YouTube thing, social media thing, I don't necessarily give a shit about having 10 million followers and millions upon millions of views on my channel. Like, if I can get 1, 2, 3, 4, like just as many as possible cops to get on a better path, to be more prepared for the job, so they can go home at the end of the day, like that's all that matters. So guys, I hope this video helped you understand why practical shooting and competitive shooting are probably the best way to improve your firearm skills as a cop. If you have any questions, or you have some thoughts of your own that you want to talk about in further detail, make sure to drop those in the comments below, and I try to get to all the comments as fast as possible, so we can have a further discussion about it down there. But with all that being said, if you enjoyed this, you want to see more, let me know. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, all the fun stuff that helps us know that we're doing good stuff and allows us to know kind of what y'all want as the audience more. So it's already been a long video. Without rambling too much, thanks for watching. Have a good day.